I was born and raised right here in the city of Chester, and I can remember coming over town, which is what Chester residents call the downtown area, with my mother, and we shopped and we went to this wonderful farmer's market.
People came here for goods, services, entertainment, for just about everything. We've had quite a few of the major stores.
I can remember when there were movie theaters, a skating rink, and just numerous things to do.
It was a heavy industrial type town with a lot of blue-collar jobs along the waterfront.
Unfortunately, as we moved from an industrialized town around the 60s and 70s era, it started to be a decline. Those manufacturing companies started moving out, and of course people followed their jobs. So we started our decline and decrease in population.
We had the retail change from Main Street to the malls in the 60s. We had the unrest of the 60s and the flight of the middle class from the cities.
In 1996, here in the city of Chester, most folks who visited the city would have found a predominantly poor population, a waterfront that had been the home of major industries almost since the 1700s, now mostly vacant ground and vacant buildings.
We had abandoned properties, and we didn't have that when I was growing up. We didn't have a thriving downtown or shopping district anymore.
In figuring out how we go about turning things around in a city like Chester, it's very important that you understand what the problems are so that you're addressing the right problems.
I think you start out with the realization that you're in a competitive environment, that in order for a community to succeed, you have to realize that you're in competition with other communities, for residents, for businesses, for visitors. And once you realize you have to be competitive, then you have to figure out where you're non-competitive and start to address those issues.
We were asked to prepare a comprehensive plan and economic development strategy for the city, which is really a vision. And the important thing is a plan is really the community's plan. So what we had to do was to go out into the community and ask the community, the stakeholders, the residents, what were their concerns, what were their issues, what were their major problems.
I thought and believe that the importance first is develop a professional team of people that can work through the planning that you do. To just go and hire a planning firm to develop a comprehensive or master plan and not have anybody to implement is a complete waste. You need a core group of people and a group of elected officials that support those people to be able to implement the planning objectives.
We started first to see federal dollars-wise what we could do to be helpful. We initially got some money for a building at Widener that was a high-tech building there. And then we went to work on some of the nonprofits, working with the private sector. That's one of the things I really stressed, is try to get private nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and individual philanthropists involved in the community. And we contacted several and worked with several who did their own philanthropies, quite apart from anything that the federal government was doing.
The 5 components of the plan were land use, housing, economic development, transportation, and community facilities. Housing was very poor. There was crime in the area, there was trash. And those were some of the major issues that they were concerned with. How do we clean the city? How do we make it look better? How do we live better, develop better playgrounds and parks and recreation? And also jobs. How do we create more jobs?
We started a very aggressive program to demolish any vacant, abandoned buildings as public nuisances and demolished thousands of units.
The Housing Authority took the lead and began to apply for federal grants to improve their housing.
We've worked very hard for Chester to get a Hope 6 grant, which was a housing grant to take an old public housing unit and turn it into a mixture of home ownership, market rate home ownership, subsidized home ownership, as well as affordable housing.
We wanted to make them just like regular housing units in any community. So the housing was designed with parking spaces, with outdoor private open space, front yards, rear yards. And those things were incorporated in the whole designs. The end result was a very attractive residential development that did not look like projects.
You have to have a housing base, you have to have parks, you have to have what makes a community a livable community.
So a lot of the money was spent in time on parks and streetscapes.
We looked at transportation. We had to have improved access. We had great location, but while 95 traverses the city, it doesn't link very well with the city.
So how did we make that connection? And we came up with what we called a waterfront access loop.
We worked on trying to get some private sector investors in. The biggest coup was to redevelop the waterfront. We worked with Preferred Real Estate and Mike O'Neill to try to open up the waterfront for development. Everything from ramps off the bridge to ramps off I-95 to get access to the waterfront, to highway improvements between 95 and the river. We've done all sorts of improvements in and around the bridge. So that's been a fair amount of public dollars, but there's been a huge private sector investment as a result of that.
It was also about helping people who might make other choices, make a choice to come to Chester, and that had to do with creating incentives. We made very extensive use of something called the Keystone Opportunity Zone, a state program that provides pretty much 100% tax abatement for local and state taxes.
They essentially allow a business to locate and have freedom from county, city, and school real estate taxes for a period of 13 years and certain state taxes for that period. And if you live in one of those Keystone Opportunity Zones, you don't pay a Pennsylvania income tax.
So it has funneled a lot of potential development to the city of Chester that might not otherwise have looked here.
The funding part is necessary. You can't make these changes without funding. One of the advantages of having a city in distress was, and I think still is now, that you qualify for the attention of the grant writers, the federal, the state, and the county-wide programs, as well as private foundations. You meet most of their criteria. If you have most of the statistical indications of distress, you're able to attract funding if you have the professional management in place to communicate with those funding sources.
We're sitting here in a building known as the Wharf at Rivertown that we had to fight with the Philadelphia Electric Company to keep them from demolishing it. And we said, this is just such a grand piece of architecture. We don't want to lose it. We don't know what's going to go in here, and yet we know it shouldn't be torn down.
We saw the facility here at the Wharf at Rivertown and absolutely fell in love with the scale of this building and the project itself, and the amount of good that this is going to do the city of Chester is staggering. And that is something that the management team of Admin Server was very committed to. We were extremely excited about from the get-go.
We had over 150 new members that we trained for that job. And consequently, those residents of Chester went to work and made a lot of money on that job.
In order for the city to completely turn around, the community has to be involved and they have to buy in to what we're doing. And so part of our communications plan was to get information out to the community.
I think that's the key, to make sure that information gets out to your community and that they embrace, what you're trying to do.
We began to realize our plan was working when we began to see good news stories appearing in the local paper, first of all. Secondly, when people began to call and say, I just received your newsletter and I didn't know about such and such, and this is really good, and how can I get involved?
One of the things that is absolutely essential is that you have to have strong leadership.
We created what we call a community task force that consists of residents, business people, elected officials, and appointed officials, because actually it's the community's plan, not our plan.
And then you start to look at what assets you have. We call them competitive advantages. In our case, it was location. It starts with small projects. You have to build success. Our first project was saving a sandwich shop and helping them buy a piece of ground. And pretty soon you get a few people thinking, hey, there's some good things happening. Don't let the money drive your project. Let your project go find the money that it needs. And the more you have success, the more those funding agencies will start to find you. You have to find the formula that works best for you.
I think every member of the United States Senate, every member of the House could very easily focus in on one town or one area of a town in your community and apply some of the lessons that we've used here in Chester to that community.
I think the future of Chester is extremely bright. We have, in the last few years, managed to bring a number of major developments to the city. As people get economically better, their job, their salary gets better, they get a promotion, and they want a bigger house, they don't have to leave the city of Chester. They can move up and not out and stay within the city. So our best and our brightest don't leave town.
It took maybe decades of decline, and we're not going to overcome that in 5 or 6 years. But the progress is steady, and we're moving in the right direction.